So I've got a portrait session coming up with an older couple walking hand in hand down by the beach, but it's going to be early evening time, so I'm going to need to light them to snap them off the background. I don't have the budget for an assistant. I don't need to pull a permit for this job, so I'll be limited on what I can carry in kind of a bit of a hike going up a sandy hill. That means I can get one, maybe two speed lights and an extra set of batteries, but speed lights, even two of them ganged up together, aren't going to give me the light volume that I need, and the recycle time is going to be a problem. Now I'm guessing I'll need to shoot at full power, and I'll be really jumping that recycle time. So I think my best bet is one of my studio strobes with a built-in battery. It's this guy right here. Now it's going to be placed 30 feet away from the subject, and that's a long way for a one medium-powered strobe to send light. Which light modifier am I going to use? I've got a handful to choose from. Let's test them and see which one gives us the most light out of one flash pop. A strobe like this really is the right tool for the job because of how much light output it has, how fast it will recycle between shots, and how many shots I'm going to get on one full tank of battery charge. Now, just to make sure our vernacular's straight, that's a strobe, and strobes go on light stands. This is a flash, and a flash goes on a camera or a hot shoe. This is not an advertisement for the strobe manufacturer, not at all. I don't do videos cloaked in some sort of educational thing when it's really an ad. That is my strobe. I paid for it with my own money. I use it on jobs when I think it's appropriate, and I don't use it on jobs when I don't think it's appropriate. Just thought you should know that. We need to squeeze as much light as possible out of this flash tube into a laser beam that reaches my subject maybe 30 feet away. This means we need to call on my old pal, the Parabolic. This strobe comes with a standard parabolic made for everyday use, but it's kind of small, and I'm not sure it's going to scoop up all the light that flash tube has to offer and push it out the front. So I want to go with the standard 7-inch parabolic that I have used for decades. Now I use the ones that have the ability to mount a grid spot in the front, and I'm thinking a 7-inch parabolic is going to be large enough to scoop up all the light around that flash tube, move it forward, and does a grid spot actually amplify our light, or does the resistance of having that wire mesh in front of the light bulb, does it reduce our flash output? I don't know the answer to that, and I've been using grid spots forever. I don't know why I don't know this. I'm also going to try a long throw 7-inch parabolic. I want to see what happens if I don't use any parabolic, and what happens if I take the glass protective dome off. Is that going to increase? I don't know. Then I want to try one more thing that someone suggested to me, and that is to take an octa-shaped parabolic light modifier, kind of like this guy, tear the diffusion guts out of it, and because it's got a super shiny silver interior, maybe that's going to push all the light that flash tube has in a straight direction so it'll carry. I don't know. Let's go test it and see.
Well, let's go to the beach. It's dusk. The available light is about 5 stops less than our flash, so we're going to set up a meter on a light stand that's exactly 15 feet away. When we measure our first flash, we get f16.0 at 125th of a second, ISO 640.
That's our baseline exposure right there, using full power, keeping the glass protection on that tube, and using the standard parabolic reflector that comes with that strobe when you buy it new.
Next, let's take off that standard parabolic and see what happens if we don't use any reflector at all.
Without using a parabolic, we drop one complete stop worth of light. That means no parabolic is now minus 1.0 stops under our baseline exposure. Removing the glass protective dome does pick us up almost a half a stop of light, but it leaves us dangerously exposed, particularly at the beach, and I'm a little nervous about that.
Let's put the safety glass back on and take a reading with the 7-inch parabolic reflector all by itself, and then with the 40-degree grid.
Now, if you're wondering how wide we're going to cover our subjects with light at this 15-foot mark, when we use a standard 7-inch parabolic, you can expect about a 42-foot wide circle of light. Now, that's measuring at the 2 stop drop-off points. Now, once we put in a 40-degree grid, that circle shrinks down to 25 feet. Now for exposure, using the 7-inch parabolic with no grid, we ding f22.0 on the meter, so that gives us a plus 1.0 stop over our baseline reading. And when we put the 40-degree grid spot in there, we get Less, yeah. We get 16.7 on the meter, which means we've actually knocked the light down a little bit instead of increasing it. Let's try that 30 degree and see what happens. A 30 degree is the same as the 40. It gives us a plus 0.7 increase over our baseline.
Okay, let's replace that 30 degree with a 10 degree, which is the most narrow one that I typically use. Let's see if that gives us any more brightness to our exposure.
The 10 degree grid, which gives us a 6-foot circle of light at our 15-foot distance, measures out at f16 and 3/10. That means it's 1/3 of a stop over our baseline. So my great idea that a 7-inch parabolic that spreads the light out, when you put a grid spot in front of it, that it funnels it back down into this concentrated super brightening beam is complete baloney, and forget I even mentioned that.
Next up, let's take off the 7-inch parabolic that I normally use, and let's go with a long throw 7-inch parabolic. This one's about 4 inches taller than the first one.
Well, it seems this old long throw that I've had sitting around here really isn't as efficient as the standard 7-inch parabolic. So I did try to see if putting grid spots on it maybe improved our results, but in fact it actually made it worse. So we're just going to take this old 7-inch and put it back on the shelf where it's been sitting for the last 13 years.
Well, let's take that first long throw parabolic off there and let's go with the big parabolic. Now this one is 15 inches tall and 11 inches diameter.
Holy guacamole, this thing works great. I am shocked to see that we got a plus 2.1 stop over our baseline just by using this parabolic. And when I pulled the glass protection dome off, I picked up another 2/10. That means this gives you 2 1/3 stops over your standard parabolic. That is phenomenal. Now it does have that lip in the front, so you can get grid spots for this guy. Now we've got one more light modifier to test that I'm hoping we have these kind of results with too.
Let's take off the long throw and replace it with the large octa-shaped reflector. Now remember, this is a softbox that I've just taken the internal baffle and the diffuser off of.
Even though the big modifier only came in at plus 0.4 of a stop over our baseline exposure, I did notice that it did a great job in covering a wide area of light. I could see myself using that as a parabolic on, say, a night shoot when I need to light up the side of a building or a wall in an alley. And the cool part about it is that's like a 2-for-1, because that really is a light modifier that I use quite often in my portrait business. Well, it's easy to see that the right tool for my upcoming photo shoot is going to be this big parabolic. Now, I just got this on eBay for around $60, and I noticed that there were kits with the parabolic plus the 11-inch grid spot sets for around $100, $110. And that's great news, because years ago, when I used to use these on commercial assignments all across the country, we would have to travel with them. And you'll probably pay more for the case than you did for the parabolic, which, you know, I guess that's not the worst thing ever. But when it does come to parabolics, big ones like this, big beauty dishes, for instance, they can be difficult to travel with. But small ones, of course, aren't going to do the same quality of job, but they're so easy to travel with. So when you're making your decisions on what you're going to do for your parabolics, just keep in mind that the smaller ones are going to be more durable than the bigger ones, but boy, the bigger ones do a really good job. Here's a couple more tips for you. When you use a parabolic coupled up with a grid spot as a main light, sometimes you'll notice that that light is just too bright with its specular highlights and you need to tame it down a little bit. No problem. We can add diffusion, but we need to add diffusion behind the grid, not in front of it. If you go to your local camera store or your online camera dealer, you can find some thin sheets of plastic diffusion material that's heat resistant. It's usually made by the big filter and gel companies. It's not very expensive at all. Just trace it out to the shape that you need and be sure to put a few little ears on there. Then wedge 1 or 2 sheets behind the grid when you assemble it together. Now, make sure you turn off your modeling lamp when you're going to use this, because that'll generate way too much heat. And don't forget, those sheets are heat resistant, not heat proof. If you get them hot enough, they will, well, catch on fire and turn into a big pile of goo. So be super careful, okay? Just the smallest bit of finger grease or even a drop of sweat on that flash tube will change the way that it expands and contracts. That speed of that glass contracting is what cracks a flash tube, and then it's ruined and you have to replace it. Also, those of you that are using high-powered strobe packs, if you've ever had one of those strobes let loose, little bits of glass goes flying all over the place. So part of the reason that that glass dome is on there is to protect it from any sort of, shrapnel that's flying off. So it's a great idea to live with the little bit of light loss that that dome provides. Just being safe.